Hello, and welcome to the Wisdom of Sex with your host, me, Dr. Heather Wisdom. I'm so excited about today's episode because I have so many clients that this will hit home for. And I just want to say, I know there are a lot of podcasts out there and plenty about sex and relationships, so thank you for choosing to listen to this one. I hope you find these episodes helpful and educational, or maybe they spark something new for you. This season so far, we've brought you infidelity, sex, and religious guilt, pain during sex, and the ebb and flow of libidos. These episodes were full of topics that not a lot are talking about, and today is no exception. Today we're talking about alternative relationships, specifically polyamory, open relationships, and non-monogamy. So, if you're curious about these relationship styles, considering one for yourself, or maybe just be intrigued by the dynamics, today is a good day to listen. We're talking about the pros and cons, the misconceptions, and what it really takes to make these types of relationships work. So, grab a drink and settle on the couch while we discuss the good, the bad, and the relationships that break the tradition. Let's start with some definitions, because I know the terminology can get a little tricky. Polyamory is a relationship style where people can have multiple romantic relationships at the same time. Everyone involved knows about everyone involved. Open relationships are usually about one or both partners being allowed to have sexual relationships with others while still maintaining their primary romantic partnership. Then, there are other forms of non-monogamy, like swinging, where couples engage in sexual activities with others, often as a shared experience. In the 1970s, the key party became popular among swinging couples, where each individual at the party would pick keys out of a bowl and go home with whoever's keys they picked. And believe it or not, these types of sex swap parties are still happening today. Now, the dynamics in all these relationships operate under different rules, and the lines can blur depending on the individuals involved. You're probably wondering, what's the appeal of these kinds of relationships, and why are they becoming more common? Let's talk about the why. Why do people choose non-monogamy? Well, for many, it's about the freedom to explore emotional and sexual connections with multiple people. There's a belief that one person doesn't have to meet all your needs, whether those needs are emotional, intellectual, or sexual. By having multiple partners, people can experience a greater sense of fulfillment. Imagine dating a few people. One is very emotionally fulfilling, while another may be completely sexually explosive, but not a lot of emotional connection. Being poly means you can have both. For others, it's about breaking free from societal norms. We're taught that monogamy is the only path to love, but for many, that feels restrictive. Alternative relationships offer a more fluid approach, where each relationship can evolve naturally without the pressure of forever or restrictedness. And then there's communication. People in successful polyamorous or open relationships often report having deeper, more honest conversations with their partners. They set clear boundaries, discuss their feelings openly, and continuously work on trust. But like anything, non-monogamous relationships come with their challenges. Let's talk about the potential downsides. First up, jealousy. It's natural to feel jealous sometimes, even in the most secure relationships. In a polyamorous or open setup, that jealousy can be more intense, especially if one partner starts feeling neglected, or if there's a perceived imbalance in the attention given to different partners. Another common issue is time management. Balancing multiple relationships means figuring out how to give each person enough time and emotional energy. If you're not organized, or if one relationship starts taking priority over others, things can get complicated quickly. Communication, while a strength, can also become a source of stress. Non-monogamous relationships demand constant check-ins, clear boundaries, and emotional processing. If communication breaks down, trust can erode fast. And then there's the stigma. Society still largely embraces monogamy as the right way to do relationships. Non-monogamous individuals may face judgment from family, friends, or even within their own community. There are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to non-monogamous relationships, so let's bust a few myths. Myth 1, it's all about sex. While sexual freedom is certainly a part of it, many people in polyamorous relationships are more interested in deep emotional connections. It's not just about casual flings. Some polyamorous relationships involve long term, committed partnerships with multiple people. Myth 2, it's just an excuse to cheat. The key difference between cheating and non monogamy is consent. In non monogamous relationships, everyone knows what's going on, and it's all above board. Cheating is about deception, while polyamory and open relationships are about transparency. Myth 3, polyamory doesn't work. Like any relationship style, non monogamous relationships can work if both parties are willing to put in the effort. Just because monogamous relationships can fail doesn't mean polyamorous ones will. It all comes down to the people involved. All right, let's get into the different types of non monogamous relationships. We've already talked about polyamory and open relationships, but there are others too. The first one we'll talk about is hierarchical polyamory. This is where one relationship takes priority over others. For example, a married couple might identify each other as their primary partners while having secondary relationships on the side. Next is solo polyamory, where individuals choose not to prioritize any one relationship over another. They may have several partners, but they don't necessarily live with or financially entangle themselves with any of them. And then there's swinging. This is often seen as more of a recreational activity where couples engage in sexual activities with others, usually in social settings, but without romantic attachments to the other people involved. So, how do you make these types of relationships work? First and foremost, communication is key. I can't stress this enough. In non monogamous relationships, you'll need to be more open and honest than ever before. Set clear boundaries. If you're in an open relationship, what does that mean? Are you allowed to date other people, or is it strictly physical? What are the rules around sharing details with your partner? Check in regularly. Just because something worked a few months ago doesn't mean it's still working now. Emotions change, situations change, and it's important to keep talking about what's going on in your relationships. And finally, don't be afraid to ask for help, whether that's reading books on non monogamy, listening to podcasts like this one, or seeking therapy. There are lots of resources available for navigating these complex relationship dynamics. Now, let's hear some real life stories. I received a message from a listener who has been in a polyamorous relationship for 5 years. She talked about the ups and downs, how sometimes jealousy does creep in, but ultimately, the freedom and honesty she experiences with her partners make it all worth it. Another listener shared his experience of starting an open relationship after being monogamous for years. He said it wasn't easy at first. There were lots of difficult conversations, but over time, he and his partner learned how to manage their expectations, and they're happier than ever. Hearing these stories reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to love and relationships. One of the most important aspects of non-monogamous relationships is consent. Everyone involved needs to be fully aware of the dynamics and give their enthusiastic consent to what's happening. This is not about coercing someone into a situation they're uncomfortable with. Ethical non-monogamy is all about respect, respecting your partner's boundaries, feelings, and needs. The moment someone feels like their voice isn't being heard or their needs aren't being met, things can fall apart quickly. So if you're going to embark on this journey, make sure that consent and ethics are at the forefront. So, what's the takeaway from today's episode? Non-monogamous relationships aren't for everyone, but for those who choose them, they can be fulfilling, exciting, and full of growth. Like any relationship, they require effort, communication, and a lot of trust. There's no right or wrong way to love as long as everyone involved is happy, informed, and consenting. If you've been curious about polyamory, open relationships, or any form of non-monogamy, I hope this episode has given you some insight into the good, the bad, and the complex world of alternative relationships. As always, if you have any questions or stories you want to share, reach out to me on social media or send me an email. Thanks for tuning in to The Wisdom of Sex. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a rating, and tell your friends. Until next time, love who you love in whatever way works for you and stay wise.